Welcome to the Moment of Suspension podcast. I am really excited to have my first guest with me today, my sister, Sarah Young. Welcome.
I'm excited. It's going to be fun.
So, as a recap, the first episode of the podcast was Origin of Suspension, which gives you the background as to how this podcast came to be. The second episode is Performance Overdrive. So today's conversation with Sarah is going to dive a little deeper into that conversation as to what Performance Overdrive is in kind of a real life setting. Both Sarah and I share some similarities. We grew up in the same household. We have some similar past traumas. So I'm excited to share this with the audience. Specifically, we want to talk about Performance Overdrive women, and even more specifically, high capacity women that tend to be type A, drivers, very successful in business. But it's a little bit of a delicate dance and conversation that what actually is sustainable. You know, a lot of us talk about the conversation in business of the being able to have the capacity to carry, to get to next levels so that the version of yourself is able to support that. You have the identity to be able to carry what it is you're trying to do. But I think going one step further that's not talked about a lot with that is how to carry. And so, you know, some questions with that come with, why are you the way that you are? And where is it that you're trying to go? So I'll pass it over to Sarah, and then, you know, we'll dive a little bit further into that.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting with this particular topic because I think like you had mentioned, like it's a lot to do with, I think that women that who knows how we are created. I mean, I would imagine like maybe we're born like this, God gave us these gifts, or maybe it came from root of childhood that drives somebody to that point, regardless of whether it's male or female.
Yes.
I think it's like we look at stories of people who like done real big things in their life. And a lot of times it did come from a rag to riches story or some type of crazy trauma. Really, everybody has that in their life in some way. I don't think there's anybody that gets through life and doesn't have a lot of things that just hurdles they have to go through to success. But I think it's the mindset of what happens in those periods that you determine what you're not going to allow in your life moving forward. And I think that decision a lot of times is made in childhood, whether I'm going to stay in victim state and then I carry that on to adulthood and become more passive and afraid to like, you know, fear takes over, or whether it's like, no, screw this. And this is not my life, and I'm gonna transform it into something completely different.
Yes.
Which is where it's healthy, but also can become toxic.
Right. And so it's like being productive to a point, and then where does it become destructive, right?
Yeah.
And so, but that point right there, where you were talking about kind of like enough is enough, where what you've been doing worked until it isn't anymore, which dives a little bit deeper into an identity conversation. Yeah. And I would say Performance Overdrive, to again kind of set the stage for where the podcast is going, is Performance Overdrive is that, to me, this version of yourself that has gotten you to a lot of different places, and it was successful, and it isn't that it's not okay, it's just you can't necessarily carry it with you to the next level. And a lot of people will end up staying in this place of performance overdrive, unfortunately, most of their life. It comes a point where whatever it is, like you said, there's something that will happen. Sometimes it's a new layer of trauma, you know, in adulthood, where you just start to realize this is not working anymore. So we can talk a little bit more about Performance Overdrive, but you also have a lot of great wisdom as to, you know, beyond that point. So, but I wanted the audience to recognize that Performance Overdrive is this place that you actually don't consciously realize you're in.
Exactly.
And once you actually start to consciously be like, I don't like this version of myself anymore, or not even that, it's like, I can't carry this person with me anymore. Like, what's the new version of Beck? What's the new version of Sarah? And then after that, as we were talking a little bit, where the podcast is going, you guys can look forward to. After this, a future episode will be called The Gap. And so that is really where you start working through this old version of yourself. and you're moving into the new version. And that place is really uncomfortable. And it could be a short period of time. It could be a very long season. And I feel like I went through the gap for 5 years. I know you've gone through that. And then after the gap comes this place of surrender. And that's where you finally are exiting the gap. Like the operating system upgrade is complete. And then you're now starting to transition into being able to step into your calling. And so then after surrender is the calling. And then, and we're not going to probably get that far today, but I'm cool if you want to, is then you start to get into this place where I call it's like the assassin. You start to become dangerous.
Yeah. I think that the root, there's always a root when it comes to performance overdrive.
Yes.
And it many times comes down to fear
Yes.
or unforgiveness, or like there's these layers that things that we don't actually want to always talk about or deal with. But a lot of times we'll just use fear as an example because it's an easy one. A lot of people have that. What is it? A fear of being poor, or a fear of this, a fear of that, fear of like not having enough,
rejection.
Or fear. Yeah. So these things drive a lot of times it initially, which until you get to the point many times in adulthood where what you had said is where it's like, okay, this is enough. Like it got you to a certain point. I know for myself, I'm in a lot of male environments as a woman, especially in business in general.
And
as a
same,
woman, right?
Same
and
for
so,
me in chiropractic.
You read the books, you go to the seminars, you're in the masterminds, and it's like drive, cold ice baths, and wake up at 2 a.m. and grind. And and you can get, especially a woman like how you and I are, it's like, oh, let's go. I can compete with the boys. Let's go. And you can.
Yeah.
And actually there's a level of it that's actually healthy because it's like it just like creates this machine. But there's a point where you can't sustain it anymore. And you have to look back and say, okay, well, what pieces of that can I take? And what pieces of that can I say, no, that's actually not how I was designed to operate.
Right.
I can still be high capacity. I can still be successful. I can still be like all of these things, but I don't have to actually sit in that masculine energy. And it's a total dance. It is a huge dance when it comes to our types of personalities, high capacity women in boardrooms or, entrepreneurship, all those things, because it's a mindset thing that I don't think as women we're necessarily like, we're supposed to be soft and this and that, it's this nurturing thing.
Yeah.
And so dancing between nurturing soft female and like hard, like mindset, like nothing can touch me. But once you clear that stuff and you realize, okay, I've cleared through fear, rejection, anger, bitterness, all these things. And this is still me. This is still me. Like I'm not all of a sudden this like soft, passive female sitting on a couch and there's nothing wrong with that. This is not to discount that at all.
But I think that's where it gets convoluted.
That's where you get confused. And all of a sudden you can crumble into being like, oh, I'm not supposed to be like this. So it's very important that you surround yourself with the right people. They say, you're 6 and all of that type of thing, or you're 5. What is it? You're 5 or you're 6?
It's not 5, right?
I should know this. But
who you hang out with.
And it is important because those that can understand who you are, speak life into pushing you forward and still empowering you into that calling and being like, no, this is who you're designed to be. You aren't meant to be this other type. This is who you are. You're not crazy, but let's figure out how to keep you healthy in this calling, in this drive, in this purpose.
Yes.
And that's where I think you really start talking about how you hit rock bottom, where you start kind of deconstructing yourself and figuring out, okay, how can I do this still, but not be in this, this mode that's like this tornado in life.
Exactly. And that's chaotic and ultimately not sustainable.
Yeah.
The rhythm and the pace, like you've got to figure out, okay, like how am I wired? What's the appropriate way to proceed forward?
Yeah.
Where a lot of the junk that maybe wasn't you, right, is getting through that part is the trickiest part, where you were saying is we've got to go back a little bit to childhood and past traumas and figuring out, okay, where did the fire start? But now who actually really am I? And some of that probably made me a little bit of who I am as well.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting conversation. And the topic of containers, healthy containers, business creates that for us. Horses creates that for me. A husband creates that for a wife. But also past experiences in life, of our family life. And we didn't have a terrible, household growing up. We actually had some normal years, but then some things happened. Our parents got divorced, then dad died. Mom, was trying to figure out how to support as a single mom. And then I watched her. Sarah's a little older than me, so Sarah had exited a little sooner. But I was with mom, and I was in high school, and I would watch mom work 2 jobs. So she was a full-time teacher, and then I would watch her in the evening go do her second job at a call center. We started to work at a really young age.
Yeah.
And so again, that's like super, it's a positive, but we didn't have a chance to just kind of learn how to be a little girl and rest and let daddy provide. Because I do think that there are positives to that of a
100%.
woman becoming wired in a healthy way. Like, we're going to be who we are, and we both are fiery regardless. But those past experiences of the family dynamic being a little warped and the roles not truly being defined, then you start to carry that into adulthood.
You come out of childhood, you're going through college, building businesses, building families. And so you're not thinking about your past.
No.
You're like, I'm not a victim. Everybody has shit that's happened to them.
Yep.
I don't care. It's no big deal. But then all of a sudden, like, it catches up to you. And I'm almost 40 now.
And I'm 36, and it starts to catch up to you now.
Yeah, and you're like, and you start to see these patterns because you've lived enough decades now to see the patterns.
And yourself as well. Like, you've seen
Yep.
so many different versions of yourself, but the pieces that you've continued to carry, and it's like, I don't need you anymore. So this is a great pivot into just relationships in general, because this can show up in friendships. This can show up in, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. And we don't need to go into those details. I just want to generically speak to that, because this could also show up in friendships. The word that comes to my mind is being like, they can't access you. Right. So you kind of start to create this wall, and I can speak a little bit more. Sarah, we have this great contrast today, because Sarah's married and has kids. I'm not. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I have had serious relationships. I just haven't gotten married yet. And that's not to blame any previous partners. It actually goes back to this conversation where I want so badly to have a man lead me, and I just haven't landed in that correct container yet. And so those are things that I've had to work through. And is it possible that I've had, past relationships that might have been the right one? I don't have an answer for that, right? But it's just an interesting conversation where I think that we also have to be careful that we don't start to put our guard up, where you're just running, grinding. So what you're saying is finding this in-between place of being soft enough where a man could lead you in your relationship, but also that you can build healthy friendships with other women, with other men, things like that.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's really important to be aware that, we were talking about the soft and the hard and the grind and the two. And I think that it's really important to get to a point where you're like, you know what, I can be both.
yeah.
I don't have to take this. And it is a mindset thing. It's practice, it's conscious discovery. But you can do both. And you start to look for other types of females and examples to be able to be like, okay, how do you balance this, and how do you do this, versus it's like, no, this is just the way I am, and all of this. And I don't know if you ever really fully reach perfect balance. I don't think that there is perfect balance in life when it comes to this, especially when you're high capacity. I mean, you look at the different successful entrepreneurs, most of them, especially men, you'll hear it's like, no, I wake up, I think about work, I do this, I do that. When I'm watching a movie, I'm thinking about strategy and business and this and that. There's no guilt or shame in it when it comes from a man saying it, right? It's like, no, that's how they're supposed to be. No wonder they're successful. That's what it took them to get there. And but as a woman, there's the side of it's like, well, no, I need to now go into mom mode or wife mode or soft mode. And so we have an additional kind of complexity to it. And I think men, obviously, they deal with this too in order to have a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
If they're the whole other extreme, this is where we see divorce and all these other things too.
Yeah.
But it's not as widely talked about, I think, in female circles on how to navigate that, because I don't think there's ever like a perfect reach.
No, and that's why we're having this conversation. Actually, I call it like it's the performance overdrive female archetype, that it's actually not talked about a lot. And because you're either like over here, building businesses and grinding and figure out how to be a mom and married too, or you're over here, and which is not, one isn't right or wrong, where you might be a stay-at-home mom, and so you're not struggling with having to deal with a business, but you're struggling with other things at home, of managing the home.
Oh, I mean, being a stay-at-home mom is just as exhausting, if not more, than being. I'll acknowledge that.
So I think we could agree in general, like that women can struggle with this, men too. Like I'd love to have another interview of a man having this conversation with me. Which also, makes me think of, I've also sought out male mentors in my life. So this isn't just about like women with women. This is finding healthy relationships with men that set great examples, which I hope like my future husband will also, obviously falls into that category. But also, male mentors that you find that, keep you straight, like,
Yeah, and I think a lot of that just comes back to guilt and shame taking you out on one side or the other. And also understanding that there are seasons in life.
Yes.
And being okay when you're in a certain season. And it's very hard as a high capacity driven woman to sometimes sit in certain seasons. But you have a whole life to do and be and develop. And as a creative, because I'm a creative, I think a lot of creatives, a perfect example would be like a painter, right? They could sit there for hours and hours and hours and weeks working on this one tiny little piece and just be happy and content in it. You're grinding in your mind and you're like, you have the vision and like you want to get there, but like it's going to get there. But sometimes it takes time and it takes work, and sometimes you screw it up and then you have to start all over again. And it's in this process, right?
Yeah.
And so life is that perfect process where sometimes it takes a little bit longer. And when it's so cliche, but it's not the destination. It is the journey, and starting to love the journey and the process, and being okay to sit in certain seasons and not necessarily tap out, but just know, okay, I can't go as hard in this one.
Right, exactly.
Or, I'm going to like more focus on this percentage right here. And like, for instance, I'm in the beginnings of building a business again, a new one with a business partner, and I'm in grind season. My family knows I'm in grind season. This is the time right now. A few years ago, I actually hit a really rock bottom point after having my second son, where I was tapped out. I was burnt out, adrenals blown, had just been overperforming completely. And actually I was at one of the highest points in my career. I was making about $30,000 a month. And it was doing fantastic. And I literally shut the business down because I was just at full capacity, and I couldn't take it. I combusted. And so,
and mine was around 20K. Different business, chiropractic, right? Sarah and I have actually, we've shared similar business journeys. You're the creative, I'm the athlete. So I get obsessed with getting better at riding horses, right? Is my container.
Say I'm athletic too.
Sarah used to ride horses, we both snowboard, but
yeah, I would say that's accurate.
Right? I lost my train of thought with that.
We run in parallel a lot. So like I
wanted to burn mine down, right? So we're both in a rebuild season.
I remember saying that with you and being like, you were like, I'm going to sell it. Because I had I'm always about 6 months or a year ahead of you, I think, in certain things. And I've noticed this trend. And so you were like, I had just burned my business down, basically. And I was just like in this dark place and all of this. And
I was right behind you.
And you were right behind me, and you were coming up and you were like, I'm going to sell it all. I found someone that'll buy it for $100,000, my list. And I had enough brain left at that time where I was like, you are flipping crazy. Do not do that. I'm like, that list is gold. Don't you dare sell that list, because you're going to come around again and you're going to sell that list again.
And those lists are real people that I enjoyed taking care of. And I couldn't think clearly. I was in performance overdrive. I wasn't in the gap yet. I was starting to work through that gap, which is why there'll be different versions of the gap where you're trying to work through this new version of yourself and the things that come along with that, and maybe a business that you built that's not sustainable. And you're coming to this reality where you're like, oh my gosh, like the version of myself isn't working anymore. So this freaking business that I built was the version of Beck that built that.
Yeah.
And now I don't want any of it.
Yeah.
And so how do I carry this business with me into this new version? And so you're just like working through this. But the gap can be a really quiet, dark place. But it also can be a very like loud and aggressive place as well, where you're like pissed off at the world, you know, like I feel like that might be the beginning of the gap for some people, where you just want to burn it down, give it away.
Oh, it's 100%.
Start over.
100% the beginning of the gap, because you have to hit rock bottom in some capacity, and it's usually mental capacity, or everything is just coming together, and you're like, this isn't working, and you have to hit it, and then that's the process of the gap where surrender happens, which I know you're going to talk about on future processes or podcasts, and that surrender spot where you're able to get just like with yourself, if you believe in God, with God, and it's the most beautiful period. Yes, there's tension. Yes, it's like there's a lot in that. But being in that surrender process where you can think clearly, you finally give yourself a moment to think, and you realize, oh, you know what, maybe it's not as bad as it is if I shift this business here and do this thing and move this piece here and kind of reassemble the whole puzzle. And I think that's what you did in your period, where it was like, you're like, oh, actually, light bulb moment. I could actually fix this business. And then you're able to turn it into what you actually want to turn it into next. And that's just business in general. I think when you've been in business long enough, you go through different periods, and it's these bottleneck moments where you mature as an entrepreneur, mature as a person, and you realize, oh, this is just the next bottleneck. I don't need to burn it down. Like, this is just the next thing that's gonna, like, I need to tweak some things so that it goes into the next level of myself. So, and what's gonna sustain this period of my life, and what my goals are in this period of my life, and all these things.
It's so good, because the surrender, I felt like one of the things I talk about in the actual Performance Overdrive episode was my story with my horse, and where I just finally was like, okay, a new trainer is not going to get me out of this. Putting a new, different saddle, different bridle, a different bit. At that point, the only solution was from this. I was in the gap, and I was on my way to surrender, and I didn't know it. Is that that's when I converted Gigolo to a trail horse, and that's like an example of this internal thing that we have going on a lot of times in life and in business in different phases and seasons, where I just had to, it was the beginning of letting go. It was the beginning of the surrender, and I gave up show jumping and competing at the time. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to come back to that, right? I'm getting closer to that again, of getting back into show jumping, seasons. And so I had to go back to who I was as a little girl, just galloping through the peanut fields of Virginia and getting
the bareback. Our mother was nuts. I can't believe she let us do that. We literally were cantering. That's not a gallop. It's like trot. What is it? It's
trot, canter, and then gallop. But we were galloping.
Oh, we were galloping. Okay, yeah. We were literally
with no parents out,
like no saddle on. Like literally, I remember riding my horse with no saddle in the middle of a peanut field, miles away from the barn, through the woods, with all like 5 or 6 of our friends, and like holding on for dear life onto like literally just a bridle and their hair, and their hair is flying in your face.
And I remember this goes back to all of it, this links in though. Where I remember telling myself as a little girl, just don't fall off, Beck. Like, you just have to hold on, which is so applicable.
You fell off a lot. I don't think I ever fell off.
There was this one moment though, I remember when I first unleashed Flash, my horse, where I remember it was like a true gallop, when my cheeks were like
no
jiggling.
Better feeling. There is literally no better feeling than that. Like, it's like you were just flying through the air. Yes. Like, you can like feel the horse's energy underneath you.
But it goes back to the surrender, and that's why I needed to go back with that with Gigolo. Yeah. I needed to work through that mentally with myself, and that version of myself, and which is the beginning of which is what you said is so beautiful, the surrender, which is also releasing control, and trusting. It's a season of that, because then, and where this is going, the next episode we'll talk about the gap. Then the exiting the gap is truly when you enter the phase of surrender, which is this really beautiful, peaceful phase. And then you're able to step into the calling. Yeah. And it isn't just a one-time thing, like you said. I think the cool thing about this series is that you revisit these phases
100%.
Like at all levels. Like you said, and it's just because you're making 7 figures or 8 figures doesn't mean you're exempt from that. You might end up in a performance overdrive season, and you've got to rework through things because old fear patterns are going to come back, old versions of yourself that kept you safe for so long.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but my favorite part is so the calling and then what I like to call the assassin. And that's when you become dangerous to the world, you know, like in a good way,
Yeah.
where you make the biggest impact. And also I think from like a biblical and spiritual sense, like you become dangerous to the enemy at that point too.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about this because our current business, my current business, my business partner really came out of these dark seasons for both of us where it was just like he wasn't in his lane in convergence, like rock bottom things, not doing what he was called to do, successful, like built multi-billion dollar businesses, same as myself. And I had hit this point and through it, like God brought us back into what we call convergence, into the right lane, the right people, the right time, all of these things. And so our business is all about that, like finding what you're meant to do, like your calling and purpose in life and serving those people and going all in and not being afraid to and all that. And so calling is a huge thing I think for me, because it's a baseline and values for exactly what I'm doing these days. And the thing that people need to realize when they step into that calling is that, like you said, it's really important. It doesn't mean like it's like all uphill from there.
Yeah.
Actually, when you're in it, the warfare and the opposition just can hit even harder. But luckily, you've built the muscle, you've built all of that before that you know you can get through it. And so, but dude, it can get super intense in the calling as well, where it's like, oh, okay, this is what I want. And this is what I thought I wanted, but it's not as glamorous sometimes. But that's the beauty, is that you've found yourself, you've found your identity, you've found like what God put you on this planet to do. And at this point, it's like, hit me harder. It's like, hit me harder.
I can take it now.
And it's just like, let's go.
Yeah.
And that's the at that point, you're like, nothing can take me out.
But in a healthy way, like, so for us, our secret weapon is the Bible, but also an assassin is interesting because when you dissect that word, it could be a woman or a man, and they come in quietly. Like an assassin you never know has arrived. And they come in the building and they leave and they did the work and you didn't even know it. So, right? So it's this interesting thing where when you get to those high levels, yes, it might be loud at times, but some of that work is, someone didn't even know you're there.
100%. The building phase of things. I mean, we see examples where it's like the alpha man and the alpha female, this and this and that, but it's those that sometimes, like you said, are doing the quiet work because they're so in their lane.
Exactly.
That like they don't need to be big, bold, and loud, and here I am. Instead, you just get placed in those positions just naturally.
Right.
With the right timing and all of that, versus like having to strive. Sure, you're still working hard, you're not being passive, but it's no longer this performance. So we talk about performance overdrive, but now it's like just performance in general.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's a great way to land this too, is that the word performance is not the problem. It's the overdrive version where the RPMs have been, you're revving the engine and you haven't quite figured out how to have performance in a healthy container, a sustainable way.
I think that a lot of the times up to that point, the fear, the root, all the things that drive, needing money, needing safety, needing whatever it is, it's driving you there. Once you shed all of that, you're like, you know what? Whatever at this point, right? And then you're able to be like, this is actually more than just about me. This is about others. And so I have to step into this, because if I don't, then other people can't step into theirs. Because you fulfilling your calling, you being in your lane, then is a conduit and allows others that will never get there to be able to. We see this all the time in our business, because we specifically deal with people who are creating online digital courses and coaching programs and stuff like that. And so there's a real internal battle there with identity and just like all of these things that can take you out. But if these individuals do not step into this and fight through all of the hard things in business and mindset and life, then they hundreds, thousands of people beyond them that their reach is going to impact won't have their impact. And then that touches families, that touches generations. And so it's so important. And I think that's what eventually they ask you, what's your why? What's your why? And that really does become that naturally. And that's where success really is at the end of the day.
I love that. Thank you for doing this interview with me. I hope this was super insightful for all of you and that it has set the tone for the rest of where this podcast is going. How can people find you, Sarah? What on Instagram, where is the best place for people to find the vessel?
They can find Vessel Business on Instagram. It's just Vessel Business or vesselbusiness.com.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Okay.
Yeah. This was a lot of fun.
I know.
I had a good time.
Me
Thanks
too.
for having me.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.